Welcome to Chapter 5. I promise not to make as many videos as I did for Chapter 4, but it was really important, I thought, to nail the strategy, to give you application of the strategy, but also to give you an example of how it plays out with the J.C. Penney case. So forgive the number of videos. Hopefully we won't have that many for Chapter 5, but let's get started. Chapter 5 is all about competitive rivalry and competitive dynamics. So I want to call your attention back to Porter's 5 forces of competition. And you'll recall that we initially talked about this in Chapter 1 and then also in Chapter 2. So specifically what we're talking about here is competitive rivalry and the things that influence competitive rivalry, such as the number of competitors, the differences in the PQ rating for you guys in Globus, or quality differences, which of course quality is also pretty subjective and it's defined by the customer. And then there's other differences, things we can do to build customer loyalty, to make it more difficult for customers to leave us by having switching cost, or what it costs for a competitor to leave the market. So with Porter's 5 forces of competition, of course, you recall that you've got the 5 forces, and each of those forces independently points to the center, which is where rivalry among existing competitors is. That's competitive rivalry. But you'll also notice that this little circle with the arrow that you see means that competitive rivalry is not only influenced by threat of new entrants, bargaining power suppliers and buyers, and the threat of substitutes, but also that competitive rivalry is actually influenced by itself. In other words, it kind of becomes a vicious cycle. The more competitive an industry is, the more likely that it's going to get even more competitive. So we need to know about that. We need to take action to make sure that that doesn't happen in our industry. So I'm going to start with some definitions for you guys. So within the action capture camera and UAV drone market, we have the 6 companies plus the 2 teams that I'm running right now, and I'll show you the outcomes tomorrow for those 2 teams. We have competitors. So the 8 companies that are operating in our industry are the competitors, okay? We're operating in the same geographic market. We're offering the exact same products as of year 5, and we're targeting similar customers. So we are direct head-to-head competitors. Now, I'm not going to get into direct and indirect competitors, but you do need to be aware that there is such a thing as indirect competitors, and those are folks who are offering maybe substitute products or potentially offering the same product but in a different market. So those are competitors. You have competitive rivalry. That's the actions and responses occurring among and between the firms as they maneuver trying to get that advantageous market position that they're trying for. Okay, the outcomes of competitive rivalry influence your ability to develop competitive advantages as well as sustain those competitive advantages. We know, of course, that every competitive advantage has a short life. It should be your goal to make that last as long as it possibly can. Just like the goal of a company is to extend the life cycle of that company, your goal should be to extend your competitive advantage. Okay, and competitive rivalry also is a direct influence on financial returns, not just for you as a company, but also for the entire industry. Generally speaking, the more competitive an industry is, the lower the profitability is for that particular industry. Okay, so moving on, competitive behavior. Those are the actions and responses that are taken at the firm level. Okay, so when we say competitive behavior, we're talking about what companies do. They're making an effort to build or defend their competitive advantage and improve their market position. Okay, you guys are engaging in multi-market competition because the 8 companies in the Globus industry are competing head-to-head in 8 different product markets. Okay, so you've got 2 different products and you've got 4 geographic markets. So remember, you've got 8 different product markets. So you have multi-market competition. Then you have competitive dynamics. That's kind of the characteristics of the industry, the way that the industry emerges. It's the total set of action and responses taken by all of the firms competing within the industry or competing within a specific market. Okay, so this kind of lays out visually what happens. Okay, obviously, starting here, competitors engage in competitive rivalry. Why do they do it? They're attempting to gain an advantageous market position. Obviously, they're not just seeking that advantage, but they're also seeking above average returns. How do they engage in competitive rivalry? Through their competitive behavior, which includes their actions and responses. And then competitive dynamics not only arise as a result of competitive rivalry, but also as a result of competitive behavior, the actions and responses. Competitive dynamics, that's the dynamics of the industry as a whole, because we're talking about all of the firms competing in the given market, okay? So hopefully that sets the stage. We'll dive just a little bit deeper into competitive rivalry, competitive dynamics, competitive behaviors, competitive actions, competitive responses. We'll cover a little more of that, but my goal is to get you through this chapter really, really quickly.